Good morning. It is June 17th, and this is the OSU Turfgrass Teen Times. Online today, we've got Dr. Dominic Petrella, Dr. David Gardner, Dr. Dave Shetlar, and the inimitable Pamela Sherratt. And what we do have is a lot of heat and a lot of problems. This week has been pretty rough for large parts of the state, whether it's power outages, flooding, excessive rain amounts. Also just saw some dollar spot activity on our research green here at Hawk's Nest. On my back lawn, once again, I've seen some pythium on juvenile turf. I was not irrigating it, I swear. I was being very cautious this time. But with the temperatures and moisture we've seen, those problems are going to continue to arise. And looking at the forecast, it looks like we could have a bit of a rough couple of weeks, 14 days coming up. And I've seen a couple of superintendents already tweeting about maybe this being reminiscent of 2012. I don't think we're quite there yet, but we are getting into potential for fairly excess heat. And so a couple of things, making sure everybody's staying hydrated on the crew, sunscreen critical from the disease insect standpoint. We'll have follow up on that. But the one thing will be to try and not do too much, right? I think in these instances, it may be less is better. And so irrigation, cautious, unless that wind is forecast to blow for excessive periods of time and you got high temperatures with it, then potential problems might arise. First up today with discussion on weeds, Dr. Gardner.
All right, let me see if I can do this correctly this week. Good morning, everybody, or whatever time of day it is that you happen to be viewing this. So, Ed, of course, it's going to be like 2012. We've already had a derecho, Derico, however you want to pronounce it. Ha, ha, ha. All right, as far as weed problems go, depending on where you are in the state, your crabgrass is probably anywhere from 3 to 4 leaf or maybe 1 to 2 tiller. So like this or like this. And I caution that this is the time of year that you become tempted to attempt to treat crabgrass, but one of our favorite ingredients for the control of crabgrass, quinclorac, we know tends to be not as effective on crabgrass in this growth stage versus if it's either in leaf stage or if it is beyond 3 to 4 tiller. That's when quinclorac starts to work much, much better. Alternatively, what you can do is you can take quinclorac and you can mix it with another herbicide like mesotrione or topramazone, but just straight quinclorac at this time of year, I would wait a couple of weeks before attempting to make that treatment. Now, that said, one of our emerging weed problems is field paspalum, which is becoming more prevalent by the year. And so if you see big, fat, sassy leaves poking out of your turf at this time of the year, it's not crabgrass. It might be Johnson grass, but more than likely it's field paspalum. So, we're talking leaf blades that are a ½ inch in width or more with a nice bright white midrib on them. It's got a pretty distinctive seed head on it too. Now, I was talking with one of our OTF past presidents yesterday, and he indicated that people are having considerable difficulty with this particular weed, but I do want to assure you that I've done some testing, and topramazone works pretty well on field paspalum. The trick with that is that if you're controlling field paspalum, you should go out with topramazone by itself, full label rate. 2 applications, 3 weeks apart. You can do that anytime between now and August, and you should get good control. Here's what it looked like when I did that in a trial a couple of years ago. So you can see that field paspalum is pretty easy to see in the turf since the leaf blades are like 15 to 20 times the width of the desired turf grass. But you see 2 applications basically cleaned it out. Now, the trick with this, though, is that sometimes, just like when we try to control dandelions and we get control of the top growth and then the dandelion grows back from the taproot, I've seen evidence to suggest that this herbicide topramazone controls field paspalum pretty well, the top growth, and then sometimes the field paspalum will try to recover from the rhizomes. Usually that happens in the early spring. And so if you see that, then you can go out and attempt to control it again. But topramazone does work fairly well on field paspalum. Again, if it's crabgrass that you're dealing with, either do a ½ rate of topramazone with a ½ rate of quinclorac, or wait a couple of weeks if you're going full quinclorac in order for the crabgrass control to be more effective. The other thing that I'm seeing this week is a explosion of yellow flowers in our turf grass that are clover-like species, who either oxalis or black medic or bird's foot trefoil. This one, if ever there was a species that we should try to have coexist with the turf, it's a very pretty flower on it, right? But who are we kidding? Most people are not into that kind of thing, right? If you are having issues with these particular weeds, then any of the herbicides that you would usually spray to control white clover should be fairly effective. So MCPP or clopyralid or fluroxapyr. In particular, I've done some work using fluroxapyr containing herbicides to control bird's foot trefoil and got pretty good results with that. So, if you are having trouble with this particular weed, try switching to a herbicide that contains fluroxapyr. But my understanding is that just about all of our clover controlling herbicides should be fairly effective for any of those yellow flowering clover-like weeds that we're seeing pop up here in the last week or so. All right, Ed, that is what I have for today.
Thank you, Dr. Gardner. We're all about the yellow colors today. Sherratt.
Good morning, everybody. So Dave, actually, I was just about to say that the white clover in my lawn is in full bloom right now.
Oh yeah, it is too. Yeah.
And it's taking over my lawn. It's prolific in my lawn, but I actually quite like it. I'm all about biodiverse lawns. I have wild violets, I have clover. I'm okay with that if it's food for the bees. On sports fields, no. As you said, we don't particularly want it. More often than not, it's because it doesn't give a consistent playing surface for the athlete or the ball. So anyway, moving on, I wanted just to talk a little bit about the grasses. I have a whole smorgasbord of grasses, and I have Bermuda grass, I have nimblewill, I have cool season grasses, clover and violets. And the Bermuda grass is loving it right now. So here's a Bermuda grass that I plucked out of one of my flower beds this morning. I would say I've got at least 3 feet here of rhizomes. And so it's loving the temperatures. The soil temperatures right now in Columbus are above 75. We've had temperatures well above the 90s during the day. And so Bermuda grass is really thriving in this kind of weather. So it has these long aggressive stolons and rhizomes. It has hairy ligules. It has very aggressive growth habit. I have nimblewill, and that can be mistaken sometimes for Bermuda grass, but the nimblewill grows in denser patches, doesn't spread as prolifically as the Bermuda grass, and it doesn't have those hairy ligules. So there are some differences between those two, and chemical differences too. There are products that you can control nimblewill that you can't use to control Bermuda grass. Another thing that I've been noticing is the Poa annua in my lawn is starting to check out. So here we have, why don't I unblur my my video? So we have Poa annua starting to yellow out, the seed heads, light green patches. It's very shallow rooted. So even though we've had pretty decent rainfall in Columbus, if it is in a dry spot or a compacted soil spot, it is starting to yellow out. The Poa trivialis is not starting to yellow out yet. I usually see the Poa trivialis checking out, going dormant in July. So it would be a little bit soon for the Poa triv. I checked out the Poa triv in my yard today under shade. It's doing fine. In some of the sunnier areas, it is starting to thin. And so watch out for Poa trivialis. Many times that is mistaken for a disease when it is in fact just Poa triv going dormant. It will start to go dormant when soil temperatures are consistently above 80 degrees. So we're getting there. Let's see, one of the ways that we can, there aren't really any selective controls for Poa trivialis on sports fields, unless Dave wants to jump in and correct me on that. But one of the ways that you can deal with it, we can try to manage it culturally, is that when it does go dormant, if you can go in there and you can remove as much of the mat and the thatch as possible, and aggressively overseed with something like perennial ryegrass. They have seen some success with that with research that they did at Guelph a few years ago up there in Canada. So aggressively overseeding with a more aggressive grass like perennial ryegrass can somewhat help to control it. What else do I have? Dr. Gardner and Dr. Nangle and I are meeting on Tuesday to start to put the OTF conference and show education program together in regard to turfgrass professionals. So if any of you have a burning desire to see somebody or hear a topic, get those to us, to Dr. Gardner, Dr. Nangle, or myself before Tuesday. And we have the STEM camp coming up 3 weeks from yesterday. We have the STEM camp coming up. We have 17 youth registered for that, middle schoolers, and the turf team will be working with them, and excited to say that we're going to be taking them to OSU athletics and also Muirfield Village Golf Course for some hands-on STEM activities. So we're pretty excited about that. And with that, Ed, I'm going to stop talking.
You know, if I could interject for just a second, you were talking about selective rough bluegrass control. There really is no such a thing. Velocity was labeled, but it's off the market. Certainty was labeled, but now it's only for warm season grasses because it's a little bit too good at controlling all of the cool season grasses as well. And then you've got POA Cure, which would work well, but it's one, very expensive, and two, not for use off of a golf course right now. So there's really no good option with that. As far as the biodiversity with the lawns, I totally agree with you. I think the challenge is to find a selective herbicide that spares the clover, but gets rid of the other weeds that you wouldn't necessarily want, like thistle and etc. If we could figure that out, hey, that might even be my hatch project for 2022 to 2027. That would be cool. Okay, I'll shut up now.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate that. If you have thistle on the lawn, maybe keep the kids off the lawn, though. You can be that grumpy old man and say, stay off my lawn. All right, Dr. Shetlar.
Yeah, I don't have, after the marathon report that I made last week, I really don't have much to present this week other than to say it's still the same. The annual bluegrass weevil damage is definitely showing up. If you had them, you'll see it on the golf courses here in central Ohio, also down in the Cincinnati area and up in the Northeast, where we traditionally have annual bluegrass weevil. When it comes to the bill bugs, even though we had that super hot weather this last week, we had a sufficient rain events coming through that it's continuing to mask any bluegrass bill bug damage. So I think the bill bugs are definitely out there. It's just that you're not going to see the damage until we really begin to dry down. I checked this morning for the army worm update. Basically, I got a report out of Texas that was at the first week of June, and they said, we haven't seen them yet. And even though I had a report that some golf course people are mentioning down in Florida, the University of Florida is very quiet about the fall armyworm. So my feeling is that we are not seeing at this point in time any major buildup of the fall armyworm. At this time last year, we were getting quite a few reports. So I have a feeling we're just not going to see them. The field crop folks have got their pheromone traps out, and all they're getting is a very few black cutworms and very few of the native common armyworm. No fall armyworms have been spotted in any of the traps at this point in time. Again, if you think that you've got some turf that's susceptible to white grubs, right now through mid-July is the ideal time to get your grub control products out. And so that's basically all I've got to report for this week, Ed.
Thanks, Dave. Much appreciated. Good to have good news from you finally, not death and destruction. Just one thing to follow up on Pam Sherratt. Pam said soil temperature in Columbus above 75. Our weather station up in Cleveland, now it's at 2-inch depth on a modified sand soil root zone on collar height turf, and we are just above 75 degrees right now, but that's not the average. Remember, those soil temperatures, you want to really be looking at the daily averages to get an idea of how much there's an impact on it. But for the most part, the fact that everything is jumping out of the ground in growth means the soil has started to warm up enough for all of that activity to occur. Dr. Petrella, last but not least.
All right. So I've seen some grumblings on social media, and this is the time of year where we start hearing people talking about etiolation and bent grass, or etiolation and another bit of turf. So I figured I'd talk about what causes etiolation to kind of distinguish some things. So etiolation is it's a common growth habit in all plants. Okay, so on the left we have seedlings that are etiolated. These are presenting symptoms as leaves are stretched out and they're light green in color. Etiolation usually has both of those. They need to be stretched out and light green. Essentially, these leaves have diluted amounts of chlorophyll. When these seedlings are exposed to light, they are then undergo de-etiolation. So these terms are originally put towards germinating seedlings, okay? But there's other environmental parameters that can cause etiolation. So what can cause it? So I just said germination, so it's a natural phenomenon. Shade. So under altered light or reduced amounts of lights, leaves will etiolate or stretch out. Temperature. So, and I'll talk about it, is that the sensors in the leaves that sense shade also sense temperature. Therefore, when you get high temperatures, especially high dew points, you're going to get shade-like symptoms in non-shaded turf. Okay, so I'll talk about that in a minute. Also, when some plants, especially tightly mowed turf, when they start to flower, the first thing you'll see is the flag leaf. That flag leaf is the last leaf before the seed head pops out. In tightly mowed turf, that flag leaf will look etiolated. Okay, so that's not a symptom of stress. That's just a symptom the plants are flowering. And then last but not least are pathogens. So sometimes you'll get infection with bacteria, and that's going to show in the turf with the pathogen called Shetlar. You will get etiolation. But the big thing I want to point out is that a lot of times people always will associate etiolation with a bacterial infection, and that's the furthest from the truth. So etiolation can be associated with a number of factors, most often shade though. So this time of year, this picture's from Bayer. This time of year, especially in fairway height to collar height bent grass, you'll see patches of etiolated or stretched out leaves. Okay, and people will automatically go to, I have an infection of some sort. Okay, well, guess what? This always occurs right this time of year when we're hot as hell, we're wet, and it's also very humid. Okay, so don't automatically assume when you see etiolated turf in your fairway that it's going to be some type of pathogen. So I walked around our campus here this morning, and you can see etiolated creeping bentgrass leaves pretty common. Okay, this would be an example where we have a stretched out light colored green leaf amongst densely packed leaves. Okay, they're on the left, they're on the right. You brush your hands across, you can see these etiolated leaves. In Worcester, the last couple of days, we've been up towards 100 Fahrenheit. We've been soaked, and it's been humid. Okay, so I would automatically assume this isn't going to go away. Well, maybe with the temperatures we have coming up, it's not going to go away. But when temperatures return back to normal, you're not going to see these symptoms. So under high temperatures, we have these photoreceptors. So this is a phytochrome is what's called a photoreceptor that senses light. So this is how the plants kind of see. Well, what's interesting is that this photoreceptor that causes the plant to see actually senses temperature. Okay, so because it senses temperature and light or shade, it will cause etiolation under either. Okay, so I'll just put this up here. So when seeds are buried, you'll get etiolation. When plants are challenged with shade from neighbors, you'll get etiolation. When plants are challenged with high temperatures, you'll get etiolation. And then last but not least, seasonal changes. These are all sensed through that same mechanism. Okay, that's why shade symptoms might look very similar to high temperature symptoms. Last but not least is flowering. So if you go out to especially fairway height bentgrass right now, I'm seeing bentgrass flower, at least here in Worcester. Okay, so here, this would be the culm, and the seed head will emerge from this bundle sheath here the next day. Up here, this little leaf is called the flag leaf. Okay, this flag leaf, when it was at the surface, it looked like an etiolated leaf. Okay, and the next day or two, you're going to see this. So this is all bent grass at collar height or fairway height that is throwing out seed heads. So we generally assume that Poa annua is the only thing that flowers at tightly mowed heights of cut. Well, here's bent grass, the same thing. So that's all I want to talk about. Generally, as temperatures go away, you'll see this disappear too.
Dr. Petrella, I do have a follow-up question, and thank you for dropping the science journal on us. That's a first in 4 years. One thing, growth regulator use and etiolation. Where are you on that, sir?
I think it's mixed. So sometimes I think you'll see, if you aren't, let's say, within your GDD window, you might see a flush after, right? A flush of growth following it. Some bent grass cultivars, some genetic siblings in there might show the flush, might not show the flush. The research is mixed. So I've seen people, they see etiolation without PGRs, some see it with PGRs. A lot of anecdotes, okay? And that's why I'll say, I don't know. I go back to temperature. Why do we always see this with high temperature and high humidity?
Dr. Petrella, dropping some truth bombs. All right. A couple other things to keep in mind. Apologies for those of you who were wound up for the Olka Field Day in Worcester this week. We did get annihilated by those storms, and so power was only returned to the OSU campus in Worcester yesterday evening. And so making you stand and sit inside with no AC at 95, 97 degrees with high humidity was probably going to have the same effect of etiolation, but you might have fallen over. Other things coming up, keep in mind the OTF scholarship outing, and also registration ongoing for the OTF Field Day, which is in August, and the Olka Field Day in Columbus, also in August. Take opportunities to get involved. With that, if there are any questions, any concerns, please feel free to reach out to us, and we will talk to you all next week. Thank you.